Good evening, everyone. My name is Jo Baring. I'm the director of the Ingram Collection of Modern British and Contemporary Art. And tonight I'm going to be talking about 6 works from the Ingram Collection. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Ingram Collection. Chris Ingram, a serial entrepreneur and philanthropist, began collecting in 2002 and within a decade had created a substantial private collection of modern British art, which was regularly being requested for exhibitions and loans to both national and international galleries and museums. The calibre and the breadth of the collection, together with its active lending policy, means that the Ingram Collection is now recognised as one of this country's most significant and publicly accessible collections of modern British art. In recent years, the Ingram Collection has ventured into 2 new areas, supporting recently graduating and emerging artists and exploring how access to art, making it as well as seeing it, can improve outcomes for disadvantaged groups. The Ingram Collection now holds over 600 works of art across these 3 distinct collections, and all of which are available to borrow. And we're committed to using our collections to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to be inspired by art, no matter what their location or circumstances. So tonight I'm going to be talking about 6 works from the Ingram Collection, and specifically from our Modern British Art collection. Now, modern British art is a term that refers to the art made in Britain in the first part of the 20th century, when mammoth changes in human life and experiences such as the dawn of the machine age, the violent upheavals of 2 world wars, and political extremism in Europe, combined with a burgeoning engagement with modernism in the visual arts, literature, poetry, theatre, and music. There is a huge range of material, technique, style, and form, and it is such an exciting and vibrant part of our art history. And then I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Rink warrior birds, which is this piece here. So this is one of my favourite pieces in the Ingram Collection, made in 1957. Elizabeth Rink was born in 1930. Her early childhood was an idyll. She had her own pony from the age of about 3, but later it was also overshadowed by the Second World War. The Suffolk countryside that she grew up in was the ideal territory for air bases during the war, and she spoke later of the impression the aircraft and their pilots made on her. She cited this wartime experience as a child as one of several sources of the imagery of birds and birdmen that she used. She said that seeing these planes crashing into fields, she described them as broken-winged creatures, around the airfield near her grandparents' house in Thurlow, Suffolk, had a lifelong impact on her. She was left with recurring dreams and said later in life, "I've had this flight dream from the time I was very young. It's to do with birds flying, planes crashing, big monstrous things flying, sometimes with a man in them." After the war, her aesthetic sensibility was developed by a long trip to northern Italy in the late 1940s. It took place at a time when most British civilians were still unable to travel after the war, and her direct encounters with the art treasures of Venice, particularly the equestrian statues, excited her imagination and were to stay with her. She returned from Italy, determined to go to art school and study painting, and her parents let her go even though she was only 16. She first studied at Guildford School of Art and then Chelsea, and while a student, she discovered that she liked to sculpt, mainly in plaster. By making a framework and then using fluid plaster and incorporating bits of wood, newspaper, and even fragments of discarded dried up plaster, she could quickly build up the form that she was working towards. At Chelsea, she was taught by sculptor Bernard Meadows, who had also started to model in plaster. The emphasis on modelling is also found in other sculptors who studied at Chelsea around that time, such as Robert Clatworthy. Rink actually received incredible early success and acclaim. She was still an art student in Chelsea and only 22 when the Tate bought Bird in the early 1950s from an exhibition at the Beaux-Arts Gallery in London. So her work of this time, of which Warrior Birds is really a key example, are very expressionistic with these flayed, violent, tense forms. And they led her to be closely associated with what were called the geometry of fear sculptors. These were a group of older men, such as such as Lynn Chadwick and Reg Butler, whose work at the 1952 Venice Biennale was described as the most vital, the most brilliant, and the most promising of the whole Biennale. It has been said that Frink's early birds and birdmen are very much creatures of their time, and she did understand that their aptness to that historical moment in the 1950s had undoubtedly played a role in winning her early recognition. Because birds were a common preoccupation among her contemporaries in the 50s, and Frink later said that they were really vehicles for these strong feelings of pain, tension, aggression, and predatoriness. And you can see that in this work here with the claws and the spiky beaks. There were a number of themes that Frink constantly reverted to: her preference for the male rather than the female, and her tendency to work in a series. Her goggle heads, of which this is an example in the Ingram collection, for example, belong to a series of head sculptures from the 1960s, which stem from a questioning and uncompromising preoccupation with masculine power that was central to her work. And these works are quite unexpected to those familiar only with the softer imagery of her dogs and those rolling horses. And Frink talked at the time about the fact that these goggle heads were modelled on the Moroccan general and Minister of the Interior, Mohamed Oufkir, and she had seen a photograph of him in the newspaper wearing sunglasses. And she said that his face in the sunglasses has created this really sinister impression, which she'd taken as the starting point for the series. And he was regularly featured in the media at this time when Frink lived in France in the late 1960s, since he was accused of ordering the assassination of the exiled politician Ben Barker. This is another work in the Ingram collection, In Memoriam, by Elizabeth Frink. And this is one of her later heads. This is 80s, but in those later heads of the 70s and 80s, the eyes are now visible, but they're closed. And these are larger than life-size heads, and they're made with a deliberate goal of empathy. And while the goggle heads and also her earlier soldiers' heads were instances of highly personal imagery, these monumental heads call to mind the tradition of portrayals of Christian martyrs. And now I want to talk about this work by Barbara Hepworth in the collection. It's called Sculpture with Colour and Strings. The date's actually incorrect on that PowerPoint. It was conceived in 1939, which is really crucial because that's really at the time that she just moved to St. Ives. So in 1903, Hepworth is born in Wakefield in West Yorkshire, but by the time of her death in 1975, she had become one of the most important artists of the century, creating a poignant and really unique sculptural language. So at the outset of the Second World War, Hepworth moved to St. Ives with her husband and fellow artist Ben Nicholson. Limited artist materials and space restricted Hepworth to small-scale sculptures. And you can see, it doesn't have the measurements on here, but this is quite small. It's held in your hands. And throughout her life, she used a variety of materials and methods. But in the late 1930s, she's exploring these interiors with string and colour. And it really shows how comprehensively she had absorbed the language of European modernism and become one of its leading exponents in Britain, but with her own take on it, with her own language. So in 1939, the year that this sculpture was conceived, Hepworth moves to St. Ives, and the sinuous forms and the taut strings in the work really show her response to the ancient rhythms of the Cornish landscape and the sea, the interplay of light, the ebb and flow of tides, and the movement of waves crashing against rocks, creating cavities and internal spaces in the landscape. And Hepworth's strings define the space within her sculptures. They really draw our attention to that interior space, bringing a sense of fluidity and also tension. They also resemble mysterious musical instruments, and her string sculptures were really inspired by that Cornish landscape. As she put it, the colour in the concavities plunged me into the depth of water, of caves, of shadows deeper than the carved concavities themselves. The strings were the tension I felt between myself and the sea, the wind, or the hills. And I also want to talk about a couple of other Hepworths we've got in the collection. In the 1940s, Hepworth made an exquisite series of drawings and paintings using pencil and oil, such as this work called Fenestration of the Ear, the Microscope, 1948. And known primarily as a sculptor, I think that Hepworth was also this incredibly skilled draftsman, and you can see the three-dimensionality of this work. If you go closer to particularly in the hands and the figures and the faces, it's really extraordinary. And this painting, and also this one, Two Figures, 1947, were created after a 2-year period, 1947 to 1949, in which Hepworth created a number of images illustrating surgeons at work. And it was after the hospitalization of her daughter Sarah in 1944, she'd struck up a friendship with a surgeon called Norman Capener, and he invited her to sit in on operations. And Hepworth felt there was this really close connection between the work of surgeons using their hands and that of the sculptor, explaining in a lecture delivered to an audience of surgeons in the early 1950s that there is, it seems to me, a close affinity between the work and approach both of physicians and surgeons, and painters and sculptors. These series of hospital drawings also took place at the time of the launch of the NHS, 1948, a change in society that had been embraced and supported by Hepworth. And now I want to move on to this work by Eduardo Palazzi, Portrait of the Artist, 1988. So Palazzi is a Scottish-Italian artist born in 1924, and he's widely regarded due to his pioneering contributions to pop art. His innovative approach to art combined elements of popular culture, consumerism, technology, all challenging traditional artistic convention. Palazzi's work often featured collages, assemblages, and sculptures that incorporated everyday objects and materials, reflecting the post-war era's fascination with mass production and mass media. And if you look closely at this work, I wonder if you can see, but you can see that there's found objects held within that bronze, particularly that the artist is holding. And his ability to bridge the gap between high art and popular culture influenced generations of artists and contributed to the democratization of art. Now, this work is modeled on Palazzi's sculpture, The Artist as Hephaestus, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, the Greek god, which used to stand at High Holborn in London. Hephaestus was the Greek god of blacksmiths and craftsmanship and fire, known for his exceptional skills as a metal worker and sculptor, and for crafting the divine weapons and tools of the gods of Mount Olympus. So it's no surprise that Palazzi portrays himself as that god, the god of the sculptors, of metal workers. But he was also lame, often described as having a physical disability. This is the Greek god. And that added depth to his character and symbolized that duality of strength and vulnerability in his craftsmanship. He also, the legend goes, built bronze automatons to work for him, something which particularly appealed to Palazzi with his own interest in technology and machinery. This is one of the collages, the designs for the murals that Palazzi made in Tottenham Court Road. This is again in the Ingram Collection. Now, the Palazzi murals in Tottenham Court Road are a renowned and iconic public art installation in London, and they were commissioned as part of the redevelopment of Tottenham Court Road Underground in the 1980s. And the murals are a vibrant and dynamic blend of geometric shapes, intricate patterns, and colourful imagery. And Palazzi drew inspiration from various sources, including technology, pop culture, and the human form. And this eclectic mix of elements reflects the artist's fascination with the modern world and its rapid advancements. And the artwork is divided into several sections, each with its own unique theme and design. This is a really early collage by Palazzi in the Ingram Collection. It's 1946. And he was creating really significant collages in that early period in the 1940s. These early works demonstrated his profound insight into the relationship between consumerism, technology, and human existence, how we navigate that. And by assembling a diverse array of images from magazines, adverts, and industrial sources, Palazzi was capturing the zeitgeist of a rapidly changing world. And these collages not only provided a commentary on post-war era's fascination with mass production and consumer culture, but also laid the foundations for the new artistic movement, pop art, that would come to redefine contemporary art. His innovative use of collage techniques showcased the power of art to reflect and critique the evolving landscape of the 20th century, making his work a pivotal force in the development of modern art. Now we've got this work by Dora Carrington, which was made in the 1920s. And it's probably, I think it's actually, depending on how big your screen is, it's actually smaller than the image on your screen. It's literally about this big. It's a really talismanic jewel-like work. Now, Dora Carrington is associated with the Bloomsbury Group, that collective of writers, intellectuals, and artists who played a pivotal role in early 20th century British cultural and literary circles. Her importance as an artist lies in her unique style and her ability to capture the essence of her subjects' inner lives. Carrington's unconventional personal life, including complex relationships with figures like Lytton Strachey, and her open exploration of sexuality challenged societal norms and added an additional layer of significance to her work. Her artistic legacy endures through her compelling body of work, which continues to be studied and appreciated for its contribution to the cultural and social upheaval of the time. This is one of Carrington's so-called tinsel pictures, which she began making in 1923. They found a popular audience, and she sold them regularly as well as giving them as gifts to friends. This work depicts Iris Tree as a fearless heroine galloping freely on a horse. Iris Tree was an actress and poet well known for her bobbed hair, which you can see depicted there. She was a sought-after model from artists, working with artists such as Modigliani, and this work was actually owned by Iris Tree. It had a talismanic quality for her. She kept it almost as a kind of St. Christopher traveling with her, and she displayed it stacked up against books in her one-room apartment in Rome. Iris Tree is a really fascinating and unconventional figure in early 20th century Britain. She was, as I said, she was a poet, actress, associated with the Bloomsbury Group, and her poetry was characterized by its experimental and innovative style, often exploring themes of love, sensuality, and the human experience. And beyond her literary pursuits, she was known for her bohemian lifestyle and unconventional choices. She was also a captivating model for several artists. So I mentioned Modigliani, but also Augustus John. And Modigliani actually painted several very striking depictions of Iris Tree. Augustus John was another artist who was profoundly influenced by Tree, and he portrayed her in various mediums, including painting and drawing, often emphasizing her bold and spirited personality, which you can see here in Carrington's picture of her. I think you can see that she's a real character of immense vitality and charisma, embodying that spirit of the bohemian artistic circles which she frequented. And Iris Tree also sat for the British painter and writer Wyndham Lewis, a key figure in the Vorticist movement, and his depictions of her reflect his avant-garde sensibilities and his interest in modernist aesthetics. And now we're on to this work, Rye Harbour by Eric Revelius. Unfortunately, it's not a great image of it, but if you look it up elsewhere, you can see that the colours are much stronger. It's very, very beautiful, the blue, the shimmering lights. So born in 1903, Revelius left an indelible mark on the world of art and design during his relatively short life, which was tragically cut short during World War II. His work, characterized by its distinctive style and evocative portrayal of the English landscapes, continues to captivate audiences and influence artists today. He attended the Royal College of Art, where he honed his skills and developed a fascination with wood engraving, watercolor, and lithography. And his works are known for their meticulous attention to detail, use of color, and a crisp, clear linearity that set him apart from his contemporaries. His ability to capture that interplay of light and shadow in his scenes was truly remarkable and adds a unique dimension to his work. This watercolor is created in 1938, and it really shows that distinctive style of Revelius, characterized by its intricate detail and color palette. His meticulous attention to the play of light on the water surface imbues the painting with a sense of tranquility, but beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic work, there exists an undercurrent of eerie and menacing elements that add depth and complexity. Here, the calm waters belie a sense of hidden danger as the eye is drawn to the horizon, stretching out towards the continent. And if you think of the date 1938, what's happening on the continent at that time? Through his use of light and shadow, abandoned structures, water, the juxtaposition of the natural and the man-made, Revelius invites viewers to contemplate that enigmatic and the unsettling aspects of the landscape that often go unnoticed, but are undeniably present in the world around us. If you look closely at Revelius's work, you'll see that he often infuses his art with that subtle sense of unease that adds depth and complexity. This undercurrent of disquiet is a fascinating aspect of his artistic vision. And one of the ways he used this to create a sense of unease was through his attention to detail. His landscapes are devoid of human presence. They can feel strangely deserted, as if time has stood still. And that stillness can be really disconcerting, creating a sense of isolation and a feeling that something is amiss. Revelius also utilized his mastery of light and shadow to evoke a sense of mystery and ambiguity. His scenes often feature dramatic lighting, casting long shadows, and creating an otherworldly atmosphere. And here, I think there are real hidden narratives suggested and some untold stories lurking beneath the surface. Furthermore, Revelius's interest in that juxtaposition between the elements of the man-made and the natural world adds to this sense of unease. And he frequently incorporated elements of industry and technology into his landscapes, hinting at the encroachment of modernity onto the tranquil countryside. And this collision of the pastoral and the industrial create tension and dissonance. In his wartime paintings, of course, Revelius's sense of unease is more overt. His depictions of plains, airfields, and the stark landscapes of conflict reflect the anxieties of the time. The absence of human figures, as I mentioned, can be haunting, underscoring the gravity and isolation of the war effort. And this undercurrent of disquiet really adds richness to the work, inviting viewers to contemplate the mysteries and tensions that lie within the seemingly ordinary and serene landscapes he portrayed. In the same year that Rye Harbour was painted, 1938, Revelius also undertook a series of remarkable shopfront works that showcase his unique talent for combining art and design. And they really show his ability to infuse everyday objects with artistic beauty and innovation. These shopfront designs, we've got a number in the Ingram collection, were characterized by their striking simplicity and their elegant functionality. And they featured clean lines, geometric patterns, and a harmonious balance between form and function. They were commissioned by Country Life Books for their book called High Street, a children's book of shops, featuring 24 of these lithographs by Revelius. But the lithographic plates were destroyed during the Blitz. So the book they originally featured in is highly prized because only 2,000 were ever printed. And now these shopfront designs, here's another one, are a testament to his versatility as an artist and also a designer. And while he's celebrated for his watercolor paintings and illustrations, his foray into commercial design showcases his ability to create beauty in a variety of contexts. And this is the final work in the Ingram collection that I wanted to talk about this evening. It's called Golden Girl by the artist Dora Proctor. Dora Proctor is best known for her paintings of women that showcase her ability to paint softly draped clothes and her mastery of tonal harmonies, particularly in the skin tones and that beautiful hair that's portrayed here. And also you can see the textures of her dress and the cushion that she's leaning on and the chair. It really is extraordinary. The Newlyn School of Painting was a prominent art movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and it played a pivotal role in the development of modern art. Now, one of the most notable artists associated with this movement was Dora Proctor, whose work contributed significantly to the Newlyn School's legacy. The Newlyn School was founded in the picturesque fishing village of Newlyn in Cornwall during the latter part of the 19th century. And this artistic community emerged as a reaction to the academic restraints of the Royal Academy and the desire for a more authentic and naturalistic approach to art. The artists of the Newlyn School were known for their focus on portraying everyday life, particularly the lives of the local fishing community. Dora Proctor was born in 1890, and she was a remarkable painter who soon became one of the leading figures within the Newlyn School. She arrived in Newlyn in 1907 and soon embraced the local culture and scenery as her primary subjects. Proctor was particularly celebrated for her sensitive and emotionally charged portraits of local women and children, often depicting them in domestic settings. Her mastery of capturing the play of light and shadow and intricate details of fabric and textures, like I mentioned at the beginning in relation to this work, add depth and realism to her paintings. Now, Proctor, as you can see here, really paints the figure in the classical tradition. The elegant simplicity of her paintings are part of a new classicism which was a move away from the machine age works that were really characteristic of the artistic avant-garde in the years before World War I. I'm thinking particularly here of the vorticists. Now, through the 1920s, Proctor painted the human figure in this tradition, and they were really a move away from that pre-war machine age work. And the title of this painting, The Golden Girl, draws attention to the blonde hair of the sitter. It's reminiscent, I think, of those flaxen heroines of ancient Greece. Her paintings of women of this time really convey the timelessness and have the sculptural quality of classical civilization. And they spoke to a nation directly, and they were traumatized by the war. So you can imagine after the First World War that people really, they were moved and drawn to these works. Now, one of her most celebrated paintings is Mourning, and it's not in the Ingram Collection, it's in the Tate Collection, but I just wanted to talk about this in relation to her work because it is one of her most famous paintings. This was exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1927, and it gained widespread recognition when it was purchased by the Daily Mail from the Royal Academy in 1927. Now, that was a remarkable event that elevated Proctor's profile and brought her art to a much larger audience. And what made this acquisition even more remarkable was that it was the Daily Mail's decision to send Mourning on a tour across the United Kingdom. And it made Dodd one of the most famous artists of the day. The tour encompassed 23 British cities. It went on 2 ocean liners. And then it was gifted to the Tate by the Daily Mail as a gift for the nation. So you can see here that she really had an ability to depict the human figure as something monumental, sculptural, and timeless. And Mourning is a striking portrait of a young woman featuring a sense of simplicity and intimacy that became characteristic of Proctor's style. You can see that the painting depicts a woman awakening from a slumber with disheveled hair and a dreamy, contemplative expression. The use of natural light streaming in from the window gives the scene a soft, ethereal quality. And her attention to detail, her ability to capture the subtle nuances here were on full display. So, as I said, the painting's acquisition by the Daily Mail brought her work to a much wider audience, garnering attention from art enthusiasts, critics, and the general public. And it also contributed to her reputation as one of the leading figures in British art during the 20th century. Well, listen, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining me this evening. It's been a quick fire introduction to the Ingram Collection, quick fire introduction to some of my favorite artists in both the Ingram Collection and modern British art. If you want to find out more about what we do, you can go to the Ingram Collection website, as I said, or you can view us on Art UK. If you want to see the works on display, you can come and, so have a look on the website, on our website. You can follow us on Instagram, which is Ingram Collection UK, or I'm Jo Baring Art. And I just want to say thank you so much to Art UK for this initiative. It really is wonderful. It's been really great to give this talk. So thank you very much to Art UK and to Bloomberg Philanthropies. And thank you all for attending.